The words hit me like a sledgehammer wrapped in silk. Rebecca stood in our kitchen, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping the granite countertop that her father's money had paid for, delivering what sounded like a prepared statement. "He treats me like a queen. You treat me like furniture." I stopped mid-chew on my morning toast and looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd married 8 years ago had transformed into someone who spoke in press releases. Her blonde hair was styled to perfection at 7:30 in the morning, her makeup applied with surgical precision. Even her casual clothes screamed expensive. "Okay," I said. That was it. Just okay. No argument, no pleading, no dramatic reaction. The word hung in the air between us like a deflated balloon. Rebecca's face shifted through several expressions: confusion, disappointment, then something that looked almost like fear. She'd clearly rehearsed this moment, probably practiced it in front of her bathroom mirror. The devastating blow that would bring me to my knees, begging for another chance. Instead, I took another bite of toast. "That's it?" she demanded. "That's all you have to say?" I chewed thoughtfully, studying her face. The way her left eye twitched when she was nervous. The slight tremor in her voice that meant she wasn't as confident as she pretended to be. "What would you like me to say, Rebecca?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. This wasn't going according to script. "My name is Jonathan Blackwood, and I'm an architect. I design buildings that stand up to stress, that weather storms that last. I understand structural integrity, load-bearing walls, and what happens when foundations crack. I also understand when something is beyond repair. Garrett appreciates me," she continued, her voice gaining strength as she found her footing again. "He listens to me. He makes me feel special." Garrett Winslow. I'd met him at one of Rebecca's company parties 3 months ago. Tech entrepreneur, the kind of guy who wore designer jeans to business meetings and called everyone buddy. He drove a Tesla and talked about disrupting industries while drinking craft beer that cost more than most people's lunch. "I'm sure he does," I said, standing up to rinse my plate in the sink. Rebecca stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Are you even listening to me? I'm telling you I'm having an affair." "I heard you." "And?" I turned to face her, leaning against the sink. "And what? You've made your choice. You've compared your options and found me lacking. You've decided I'm furniture. What exactly are you expecting from me here?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I thought... You thought I'd fight for you? Beg you to stay? Promise to change?" I shook my head. "Rebecca, you just told me another man treats you like royalty while I treat you like an object. Why would you want to stay with someone who treats you so poorly?" The logic was unassailable, and we both knew it. She'd painted herself into a corner with her own words. "Maybe I just wanted you to care enough to try," she whispered. "Maybe you should have thought of that before you started your royal treatment sessions at the Marriott downtown." Her face went pale. "How did you—" "The credit card statements come to my email, Rebecca. The ones on the account your father set up for household expenses. Turns out the Marriott charges differently for their premium suites." She was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Then her chin lifted in that defiant way I'd once found charming. "So you knew. You knew and you didn't say anything." What was I supposed to say? "Honey, I noticed you're spending our money on hotel rooms during your lunch breaks. You would have just gotten better at hiding it." "Our money?" She laughed, but it sounded forced. "You mean my family's money?" There it was. The truth that had been lurking under the surface of our marriage for years. I made decent money as an architect, but Rebecca's lifestyle required more than decent. The house, the cars, the clothes, the vacations, all of it supplemented by the Theodore Harmon family trust. "You're right," I said. "Your family's money. Your choice how to spend it. Your life to live." I walked past her toward the stairs, but her voice stopped me. "Where are you going?" "To work. Some of us still have jobs." Jonathan, wait. We need to talk about this, about us, about what happens next. I turned back to look at her one more time. She was beautiful. I'd give her that. Beautiful and entitled and completely convinced that the world owed her happiness on her terms. I think you've said everything that needs saying, Rebecca. You've made your position clear. But what about what? Our marriage? You just told me you're getting royal treatment from someone else. Sounds like you've already decided what happens next. I left her standing in the kitchen and went upstairs to shower. Through the bathroom door, I could hear her moving around downstairs, probably calling her best friend Maya to dissect every word of our conversation. Maya Lee was Rebecca's partner in crime, the kind of woman who lived for drama and treated other people's relationships like entertainment. She'd been encouraging Rebecca's find yourself phase for months, probably cheering her on toward this moment. As I stood under the hot water, I thought about the hotel receipts I'd been collecting, not just from the credit card statements, but the actual physical receipts I'd found in Rebecca's purse, her car, even one tucked into a book on her nightstand. Room 1247. Always the same room. Apparently, Garrett liked consistency in his royal treatment locations. I'd photographed them all. Dates, times, charges for champagne and room service, a paper trail that told a story Rebecca thought she'd been writing in invisible ink. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Brandon Ortiz, a lawyer who'd been watching my marriage implode from the sidelines with the grim fascination of someone who specialized in divorce cases. "How'd it go?" I texted back. She gave her speech. "And?" I said, "Okay." "That's it?" "That's it." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. "You're scary when you're calm." He wasn't wrong. I'd learned a long time ago that the best revenge wasn't served hot or cold. It was served with documentation. I finished my shower and got dressed for work, choosing my clothes carefully. Dark suit, blue tie, the kind of outfit that said, responsible adult, and credible witness. Then I went downstairs to find Rebecca on the phone in the living room, speaking in hushed tones. Told him everything and he just said okay, like it didn't even matter to him. A pause. I know, right? 8 years of marriage and that's all I get? I cleared my throat and she spun around, phone pressed to her chest. "I have to go," she said into the phone, then hung up. "Maya?" I asked. She nodded, looking embarrassed for the first time that morning. "Tell her I said hello," I said pleasantly. "Oh, and Rebecca? I'm having your parents over for dinner tonight. 7 o'clock. I thought they should know what's been going on." The color drained from her face. "Jonathan, you can't..." "Can't what? Have dinner with my in-laws? They've been asking us to spend more time together as a family. This seems like the perfect opportunity." "You don't understand. If my father finds out..." "Finds out what? That his daughter is getting royal treatment from her boyfriend? I'm sure he'll be thrilled to hear how happy you are." I kissed her forehead, the same way I'd done every morning for 8 years, and headed for the door. "Have a wonderful day, sweetheart. Try not to spend too much on lunch." The architectural firm of Morrison & Associates occupied the 15th floor of a downtown Austin high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the city I'd helped shape over the past decade. I'd designed 3 buildings I could see from my desk, structures that would outlast whatever was left of my marriage. I spent the morning reviewing blueprints for a new residential complex, but my mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. Theodore Harmon wasn't the kind of man you surprised with unpleasant news. He was old-school Texas oil money, the kind of patriarch who expected to be consulted on major family decisions before they were made, not informed about them after the fact. At lunch, I drove to the Marriott downtown, the same hotel where Rebecca had been receiving her royal treatment. The desk clerk was a young woman with a practiced smile who probably saw more drama than a soap opera writer. "I'd like to speak with someone about billing discrepancies," I said, sliding my driver's license across the marble counter. "My wife has been staying here, and I need copies of the itemized receipts for our accountant. It was amazing how much cooperation you could get with the right combination of politeness and implied authority. 20 minutes later, I walked out with a folder full of documentation that painted a very detailed picture of Rebecca's afternoon activities: room service charges for two, champagne, late checkout fees, all charged to the card that Theodore Harmon's financial advisor, Charles Webb, had set up for household expenses. Back at the office, I made copies of everything and organized it chronologically. The pattern was clear. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 months, Rebecca had been holding court in room 1247 with her tech entrepreneur king. At 4 o'clock, I called Theodore. "Jonathan," his voice boomed through the phone. "Good to hear from you, son. How's business?" "Business is good, Mr. Harmon. I was wondering if you and Elizabeth might be available for dinner tonight. Rebecca and I have something we'd like to discuss with you." A pause. Theodore Harmon didn't get to be worth 8 figures by missing subtext. "Everything all right between you two? I think it would be better if we talked in person. 7 o'clock work for you? We'll be there." The line went quiet, and I could picture him in his study, surrounded by the oil derricks and cattle ranch photos that decorated his home office. Theodore was 72 years old and still sharp as a razor. He'd built his fortune by reading people correctly and acting decisively when situations required correction. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing, not just organizing the receipts, but thinking through the conversation ahead. Rebecca would try to control the narrative, to frame her affair as a symptom of our marital problems rather than a choice she'd made. She'd appeal to her mother's romantic sensibilities and her father's protective instincts, but numbers didn't lie. Dates and times and credit card charges told their own story, one that was harder to spin than emotions and accusations. At 6 o'clock, I headed home to find Rebecca in full preparation mode. She'd changed into a conservative dress that made her look younger, more innocent. Her makeup was subtle, her hair pulled back in a style that reminded me of how she'd looked when we first met. "Jonathan, we need to talk before they get here." "About what?" "About what you're planning to say. About how we present this." I loosened my tie and sat down in the chair that had become my usual spot over the years. The chair she'd probably been thinking of when she called me furniture. "How do you want to present it, Rebecca?" "This doesn't have to be ugly. We can tell them we've been having problems, that we're considering separation. We don't have to get into the details." "The details being Garrett?" She flinched at his name. "The details being our private business. Your private business was charged to your father's credit card, Rebecca. That makes it his business too. Those charges could be anything. Lunch with girlfriends, shopping trips, room service for 2 at the Marriott, champagne charges at 2 in the afternoon, late checkout fees on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons." Her face went pale again. "You've been spying on me." "I've been paying attention to our finances. There's a difference." The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Theodore Harmon was never late, and he expected the same punctuality from everyone else. Rebecca rushed to answer it, and I heard her greeting her parents with forced cheerfulness. Elizabeth Harmon's voice was warm but cautious. She was a woman who'd spent 45 years married to a man who didn't waste time on pleasantries when serious conversations were needed. They came into the living room together, Theodore tall and imposing despite his age, Elizabeth elegant in the way that only came from decades of practice. They'd dressed for dinner at their daughter's house, but their faces showed they were prepared for something more significant than casual conversation. "Mom, Dad, thank you for coming on such short notice," Rebecca said, her voice bright with artificial enthusiasm. Theodore's eyes found mine immediately. "Jonathan." "Mr. Harmon, Elizabeth, please sit down. Can I get you something to drink?" "I'm fine," Theodore said, settling into the sofa with the careful movements of a man who'd learned to conserve energy for important battles. Elizabeth sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap. "Rebecca said you wanted to discuss something with us?" Rebecca shot me a warning look. But I was done with warnings. I was done with managing her image and protecting her feelings and pretending that her choices didn't have consequences. "We did," I said, reaching for the folder I'd placed on the coffee table. "Rebecca has something she wants to tell you." "Jonathan," Rebecca started, but her father's raised hand stopped her. "Let the man speak," Theodore said. I opened the folder and spread the hotel receipts across the coffee table like a hand of cards. The Marriott logo was clearly visible on each one, along with the dates, times, and charges that told their story. "Rebecca has been having an affair," I said simply, "with a man named Garrett Winslow. For the past 3 months, every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, she's been meeting him at the Marriott downtown. These are the receipts for those meetings, charged to the household account you set up for us." The silence that followed was deafening. Elizabeth's hand went to her throat, her face cycling through shock, disappointment, and something that looked like recognition. Theodore leaned forward to examine the receipts, his expression unreadable. "Rebecca?" Elizabeth's voice was barely a whisper. Rebecca looked like a deer caught in headlights. All her preparation, all her careful planning for how to control this conversation, had evaporated the moment the evidence hit the coffee table. It's more complicated than Jonathan is making it sound." Theodore picked up one of the receipts, studying it with the same attention he'd once given oil survey reports. "Room 1247, March 15th, 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Champagne, room service for 2, late checkout." He looked up at his daughter. "Explain the complication." "Daddy, Jonathan and I have been having problems for months. I felt lonely, unappreciated. So, you decided to solve that problem by spending my money on hotel rooms with another man?" The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Theodore Harmon's voice carried the kind of quiet authority that had once made oil executives nervous in boardrooms. "It wasn't about the money. Everything is about money, Rebecca. The house you live in, the car you drive, the credit cards you use to pay for your afternoon entertainment. All of it comes from money I earned and chose to share with my family." Elizabeth was studying the receipts now, her face growing paler with each one. 3 months, she said quietly. 3 months of this. "Elizabeth," Rebecca pleaded, "you have to understand. Jonathan doesn't appreciate me. He treats me like I'm just part of the furniture. Garrett makes me feel special, valued. Valued enough to charge champagne to your husband's account?" Theodore's voice was ice cold now. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Theodore stood up, his full height making the living room feel smaller. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been having this conversation before you started your little arrangement. Fair would have been asking your husband for a divorce before you started spending family money on another man." Rebecca was crying now, but they weren't the tears of remorse. They were the tears of someone who'd been caught and was facing consequences she hadn't anticipated. "I want you to call Charles first thing in the morning," Theodore said to me, ignoring his daughter's tears. "Have him freeze all the accounts except your salary deposit. Rebecca can apply for her own credit cards if she wants to continue her royal lifestyle." "Daddy, no, you can't." "I can, and I will. You're 36 years old, Rebecca. If you want to make adult choices, you can face adult consequences." Elizabeth stood up beside her husband, her face a mask of disappointment. "We should go, Theodore." "Mom, please." But Elizabeth was already walking toward the door. "Call me when you're ready to have an honest conversation about your choices, Rebecca, not before." Theodore paused at the door, looking back at his daughter one last time. "I raised you to be better than this," he said quietly. "Apparently, I failed." After they left, Rebecca collapsed onto the sofa, her careful composure finally cracking completely. "You've ruined everything," she sobbed. "My whole life, everything I've worked for." "You ruined it," I said, gathering up the receipts. "I just made sure the right people knew about it." My phone was already buzzing with a text from Charles Webb. Theodore called. Meeting tomorrow at 9 to discuss account restructuring. Bring documentation. Rebecca looked up at me through her tears. What happens now? Now you call your king, I said. Tell him the kingdom just went bankrupt. See how royal his treatment is when the credit cards stop working. I left her there and went upstairs to pack a bag. I had a feeling the next few days were going to be very interesting. The meeting with Charles Webb took place in his downtown office, a space that radiated the kind of understated wealth that came from managing other people's money successfully for decades. Theodore sat across from the mahogany conference table, his face granite hard in the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The household account will be closed by noon today, Charles explained, sliding papers across the table for my signature. All credit cards associated with it will be canceled. The trust fund distributions that have been supplementing your household income will be redirected to a new account in your name only, Jonathan. I signed where indicated, my handwriting steady despite the magnitude of what was happening. What about the house? The house is in both your names, but the mortgage payments have been coming from the trust. Those will continue, but any equity loans or lines of credit Rebecca might have established will be her responsibility. Theodore spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. I want to be clear about something, Jonathan. This isn't about punishing you for my daughter's choices. You've been a good husband and a responsible man, but I won't continue funding behavior that dishonors my family. I understand. Do you want to pursue divorce proceedings? The question hung in the air between us. I'd been married to Rebecca for 8 years. We'd talked about children, about growing old together, about building something that would last. All of that felt like it belonged to different people now. I think that's probably inevitable, I said finally. Charles made a note on his legal pad. I can recommend several attorneys who specialize in these situations. Given the documentation you've provided and the financial circumstances, it should be relatively straightforward. By the time I got home that evening, Rebecca had discovered the new reality of her situation. I found her in the kitchen, surrounded by credit cards she'd apparently cut up in frustration, her phone pressed to her ear. Don't understand. There must be some mistake. I've had this account for 5 years. A pause. What do you mean insufficient funds? My father is Theodore Harmon. Look him up. She saw me watching and ended the call. They cut me off, she said, her voice hollow. Everything. The credit cards, the bank account, even the gas card. I know. How am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to pay for anything? The same way most people do. With money you earn yourself. She stared at me like I'd suggested she learn to breathe underwater. Rebecca had never held a job that didn't come with the implicit understanding that it was temporary, supplemental to the family money that would always be there. You could have stopped this, she said. You could have talked to my father, explained that we were working things out. Were we working things out, Rebecca? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Garrett. We need to talk. I showed the screen to Rebecca, whose face went pale. He's been trying to reach me all day, she admitted. I haven't answered. Why not? Because I don't know what to tell him. I typed back, address? The response came immediately, along with the address of a coffee shop in downtown Austin. Neutral territory. I'm going to meet with your king, I told Rebecca. Jonathan, please don't do anything. Anything what? Anything that might embarrass you further? I think we're past that point. Garrett Winslow looked exactly like what he was. A 40-year-old man trying very hard to look 30. Designer jeans, expensive sneakers, and a t-shirt that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. He'd chosen a corner table where he could see the door, and his leg was bouncing with nervous energy when I walked in. Jonathan. He stood up to shake hands, which struck me as absurdly formal given the circumstances. Garrett. We sat down across from each other, and I waited for him to speak first. He'd called this meeting. He could set the agenda. Look, I know this is awkward. Awkward is one word for it. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Rebecca told me you two were having problems, that you were basically separated. Did she mention that we were living in the same house, sharing the same bed? His face flushed red. She said it was complicated. I'm sure she did. What can I do for you, Garrett? I wanted to talk to you man to man, to see if we could work something out. Work something out? Rebecca and we have feelings for each other, real feelings. This isn't just some casual thing. I studied his face, looking for signs of sincerity. What I saw instead was a man who'd suddenly realized that his romantic adventure had real-world consequences he hadn't anticipated. Real feelings, I repeated, strong enough to support her lifestyle when her father's money runs out? The leg bouncing intensified. What do you mean? I mean the credit cards are canceled, the trust fund is redirected, and the woman you've been treating like a queen is about to discover what it's like to be a commoner. Are your feelings strong enough to handle that transition? Garrett's face went through several expressions before settling on something that looked like panic. I didn't know about her family situation. You didn't know that the champagne and room service were being paid for with someone else's money? I offered to pay. She insisted on handling it. How generous of you. We sat in silence for a moment while Garrett processed the new reality of his situation. I could practically see the calculations running behind his eyes. The cost of maintaining Rebecca's lifestyle, the complications of her impending divorce, the potential impact on his own reputation and business relationships. What are you going to do? He asked finally. About what? About Rebecca. About the divorce. About this whole situation. I'm going to let the lawyers handle the divorce. As for Rebecca, that's not my problem anymore. She made her choice when she decided I was furniture and you were royalty. She didn't mean it like that. How did she mean it? He didn't have an answer for that, which told me everything I needed to know about the depth of their relationship. They'd been playing house with someone else's money, living in a fantasy that had very little connection to reality. Garrett, let me ask you something. Do you love her? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Yes, I think so. You think so? It's complicated. No, it's not. You either love her enough to build a life with her, or you don't. She's about to be divorced, financially dependent, and in need of someone who can provide the stability she's used to. Are you that person? The silence stretched between us until Garrett's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his face went pale. My wife knows, he said quietly. About Rebecca? He nodded. Someone sent her photos. From the hotel. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. That's unfortunate. I didn't need to. Hotel security cameras are everywhere these days, and gossip travels fast in circles like ours. Garrett stood up abruptly. I have to go. I have to try to fix this. Good luck with that. He paused at the table, looking back at me with something that might have been respect. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About all of this. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. After he left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, watching the evening crowd filter in and out. Young couples sharing desserts, business people grabbing caffeine for late meetings, students with laptops and textbooks scattered across tables, normal people living normal lives, dealing with normal problems. None of them worried about trust funds or hotel receipts or the collapse of carefully constructed fantasies. My phone rang. Rebecca. He's not answering his phone, she said without preamble. I know. You talked to him. I did. What did you say to him? I told him the truth. About your financial situation, about what your future looks like now. Apparently, the truth was enough. The line went quiet for a long moment. Jonathan, I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but we can fix this. We can work through it. Can we? Because this morning you were planning to continue your royal treatment sessions. The only thing that's changed is that the money ran out. That's not fair. Fair would have been having this conversation 3 months ago, before you decided to audition for a different life. Fair would have been asking for a divorce before you started your affair. Fair would have been treating our marriage with enough respect to end it, honestly. I want to come home. You are home, Rebecca. You're sitting in the house your father bought, surrounded by furniture your family money paid for. The only difference is that your boyfriend has decided he's not interested in supporting your lifestyle. Please, Jonathan, we can start over. We can go to counseling, work on our problems. The problem wasn't our marriage, Rebecca. The problem was that you wanted a different life but weren't honest enough to ask for a divorce. You wanted to keep the security of being married while enjoying the excitement of being single. That's exactly what it was. And now you want to come back because your other option disappeared when the money ran out. I hung up and drove home through the Austin evening traffic, past the buildings I'd helped design, through the neighborhoods where other couples were probably having their own difficult conversations about love and money and the gap between what they wanted and what they could afford. When I got home, Rebecca was waiting in the living room with 2 suitcases packed. I'm going to stay with Maya for a while, she said. Give us both some space to think. Probably a good idea. This doesn't have to be the end, Jonathan. We can still fix this. I looked at her standing there with her suitcases, still beautiful, still expecting that somehow the right combination of words would reset everything back to the way it was before. Rebecca, do you know what the difference is between furniture and people? She shook her head. Furniture serves a function. It's reliable, dependable, always there when you need it. People are more complicated. They have feelings, expectations, limits. You wanted me to be furniture when it was convenient, and a person when you needed emotional support. You can't have it both ways. I never meant, yes, you did. You meant exactly that. And now you're discovering that furniture doesn't take you back when you decide you don't want to be queen anymore. She left without another word, and I was alone in the house that had never really felt like ours, surrounded by furniture that would outlast whatever was left of our marriage. Maya Lee lived in a trendy apartment complex near downtown, the kind of place that attracted young professionals who wanted to be close to the action but couldn't afford the premium locations. It was a significant step down from the suburban palace Rebecca was used to, but beggars couldn't be choosers. I knew she was there because Maya had made the mistake of posting Instagram stories of their girls' support weekend, complete with wine glasses and tear-streaked makeup. Maya treated other people's drama like performance art, and Rebecca's situation was apparently too good not to document. The photos told their own story. Rebecca looking devastated in designer clothes she could no longer afford to replace. Maya playing the supportive friend while clearly enjoying every minute of the attention. The captions were masterpieces of passive-aggressive sympathy. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us most, and strong women support each other through everything. But social media was a double-edged sword, and Maya's documentation had attracted attention from people who knew the real story. The comment section was becoming a battlefield. Didn't she cheat on her husband? Someone had written. I heard her dad cut her off financially, added another. My friend works at the Marriott downtown. She said, before Maya deleted the comment. By Monday morning, the story had spread through our social circle like wildfire. Rebecca had underestimated how quickly gossip traveled in the interconnected world of Austin's upper middle class. The same people who'd smiled at her during charity events and dinner parties were now dissecting her choices over their morning coffee. My phone started ringing early. First Brandon, my lawyer friend, wanting to know if I needed legal representation. Then my sister in Dallas, who'd somehow heard the story through her own network. Then colleagues, neighbors, even my dry cleaner, who'd apparently been following the Instagram drama. You doing okay? Brandon asked when I finally answered his call. I'm fine. You sure? Because Rebecca's been telling people you were emotionally abusive, that you drove her to cheat. I wasn't surprised. When the truth made you look bad, the obvious strategy was to change the narrative. Let her talk. The hotel receipts speak for themselves. Speaking of which, you might want to document everything. Phone calls, text messages, any attempts at contact. If this gets ugly, you'll want evidence. It was already ugly, but I understood his point. Rebecca was in survival mode now, and people in survival mode often made desperate choices. That afternoon, she called, "Jonathan, we need to talk." "I don't think we do. People are saying terrible things about me. Maya showed me the comments on her posts. They're making me sound like some kind of monster." "You had an affair, Rebecca, for 3 months, using your father's money. What did you expect people to say?" "I expected them to understand that marriages are complicated, that sometimes people make mistakes. Mistakes are forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. What you did was make a series of deliberate choices over several months. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching me suffer." The accusation stung because there was a grain of truth to it. I wasn't enjoying her suffering exactly, but I was finding a certain satisfaction in watching her face the consequences of her actions without the safety net she'd always taken for granted. "I'm not enjoying anything about this situation, Rebecca, but I'm not going to pretend to be devastated that you're finally being held accountable for your choices. I want to come home." "No. It's my house too." "Actually, it's not. I checked with Charles Webb this morning. The house is in both our names, but the mortgage payments come from the trust fund that your father redirected to my account. You have no legal claim to live here." The silence on the other end of the line told me she hadn't considered this possibility. "You can't just throw me out." "I'm not throwing you out. You left. You chose to stay with Maya rather than deal with the awkwardness of living with the furniture you'd outgrown." "I need my things, my clothes, my jewelry." "Your things are in boxes in the garage. You can pick them up anytime." "You packed my belongings?" "I packed your belongings. It seemed like the logical next step." Another long silence. "Jonathan, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling, figure out how to rebuild trust. Rebecca, let me ask you something. If Garrett's wife hadn't found out, if your father hadn't cut off your money, would you be calling me right now?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "That's what I thought. You don't want to rebuild our marriage, Rebecca. You want to rebuild your lifestyle. There's a difference." I hung up and went back to work, but the interruptions continued throughout the day. Text messages from mutual friends asking if the rumors were true. Emails from Rebecca's relatives expressing concern and confusion. Even a call from my own mother, who'd somehow heard the story through her church network. "Are you all right, honey?" she asked, her voice full of the kind of maternal concern that made me feel like I was 12 years old again. "I'm fine, Mom." "I never liked that girl. Too entitled, too used to getting her way. You're better off without her." My mother had never actually said she didn't like Rebecca, but apparently, she'd been holding back her true feelings for 8 years. "It's complicated." "No, it's not. She cheated on you with your money and got caught. The only complicated part is why it took you so long to stand up for yourself." After work, I drove past Maya's apartment complex and saw Rebecca's car in the parking lot. A BMW that would need payments she could no longer afford, filled with belongings from a lifestyle that was rapidly becoming a memory. I thought about stopping, about trying one more time to have a rational conversation about our future. But what was there to say? She'd made her choice when she decided I was furniture and Garrett was royalty. The fact that her king had abdicated when the kingdom went bankrupt didn't change the fundamental dynamic between us. Instead, I went home to the house that felt bigger and quieter without her presence. I ordered takeout from a restaurant we'd never been to together and ate dinner while reading architectural journals, planning a future that didn't include hotel receipts and credit card statements and the constant calculation of who was paying for what. My phone buzzed with another text from Rebecca. I saw you drive by Maya's. Why didn't you stop? I typed back, nothing to discuss. There's everything to discuss. Our marriage, our future, how we move forward from this. You already decided our future when you chose Garrett. The fact that he's not available anymore doesn't reopen negotiations. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Rebecca, but it is logical. You can't have a backup plan and a primary plan at the same time. You can't be married to me and dating him simultaneously. You made your choice. I choose you. I choose us. You choose the financial security I represent now that your other options have evaporated. That's not the same thing as choosing me. The text conversation ended there, but I knew it wasn't over. Rebecca was discovering that the world was much less forgiving than she'd expected, and desperate people often made increasingly poor decisions. I was right to be concerned. The next morning, I woke up to find my car keyed, the word "heartless" scratched into the paint in letters 6 inches tall. I took photos and called the police, then called Brandon. "She's escalating," he said after I described the vandalism. "This is exactly what I was worried about." "What do you think she'll do next?" Hard to say, but people who feel cornered often lash out in ways that surprise everyone, including themselves. I spent the morning filing a police report and getting estimates for paint repair. The officer who took my statement was a middle-aged woman named Detective Vega, who'd clearly seen this kind of domestic drama before. "Any witnesses?" she asked. "Security cameras in the neighborhood. My next-door neighbor has one that covers part of my driveway." "Good. We'll check that. In the meantime, I'd recommend changing your locks and maybe installing some additional security measures. Situations like this have a way of escalating." By noon, the story of the vandalism had somehow made its way through the gossip network. My phone was ringing constantly, friends and colleagues expressing outrage and support in equal measure. But the call that surprised me came from Theodore Harmon. "Jonathan, I heard about your car. I want you to know that Elizabeth and I are appalled by Rebecca's behavior." "I appreciate that, Mr. Harmon. I also want you to know that we support whatever legal action you decide to take. Rebecca needs to learn that actions have consequences, and apparently, we failed to teach her that lesson when she was younger. I don't want to put you in an awkward position. You're not putting us anywhere, son. Rebecca put herself in this position when she decided to dishonor her marriage and her family. We're just dealing with the aftermath." After he hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the city skyline, thinking about consequences and choices and the difference between being sorry you did something and being sorry you got caught. Rebecca had spent her entire life insulated from the real consequences of her actions, protected by family money and social position, and the assumption that someone would always be there to clean up her mistakes. But some mistakes were too big to clean up, and some consequences were too public to ignore. She was learning that lesson now, and apparently she didn't like the curriculum. My phone buzzed with another unknown number. "This is Garrett. Can we meet? It's important." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Why?" "Rebecca is talking about doing something drastic. I think you should know." The word drastic sent a chill down my spine. I typed back the address of the same coffee shop where we'd met before and headed downtown, wondering what new complication was about to enter my life. Garrett looked worse than he had a week ago. His designer clothes were wrinkled, his hair uncombed, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he wasn't sleeping well. He was already at our usual corner table when I arrived, nervously checking his phone every few seconds. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "What's this about?" "Rebecca called me last night. She was, I don't know how to describe it. Manic, maybe? She was talking about making you pay for humiliating her, about showing everyone who the real villain is." "What exactly did she say?" Garrett pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. "She sent me these texts after I wouldn't answer her calls." He showed me the screen. The messages were a rambling stream of consciousness that painted a disturbing picture of Rebecca's mental state. He thinks he's so smart, with his hotel receipts and his meetings with my father. But I have receipts too. I know things about Jonathan that would destroy his precious reputation. He wants to play games. I can play games too. Let's see how he likes being humiliated in public. You don't understand what he's really like. Behind closed doors, he's controlling, manipulative. I have evidence. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth about St. Jonathan and his perfect victim act. I handed the phone back to Garrett, my mind racing through the implications of what I'd just read. Evidence of what? I asked. I don't know. She wouldn't be specific, but she seemed convinced she had something that would turn public opinion back in her favor. Did you ask her what she meant? Garrett's face flushed red. I didn't exactly encourage the conversation. My wife found out about the affair, Jonathan. She's filing for divorce. My business partners are asking questions. I can't afford to be associated with whatever Rebecca is planning. So that was it. Garrett was here to protect himself, not to warn me out of any sense of decency or responsibility. He wanted to make sure that whatever Rebecca was planning wouldn't splash back on him. What do you want from me? I asked. I want you to talk to her. Calm her down. Make her see reason before she does something that hurts everyone. You want me to manage your ex-girlfriend's emotional state so it doesn't impact your divorce proceedings? That's exactly what it is. You helped create this situation, Garrett. You pursued a married woman, encouraged her to betray her husband, and now that the consequences are affecting your life, you want me to clean up the mess. He had the grace to look ashamed. You're right. I know you're right. But Rebecca isn't thinking clearly. She's talking about going to your employer, to the media, to anyone who will listen. She wants to destroy your reputation the way she feels you destroyed hers. Her reputation destroyed itself when she chose to have an affair. Try telling her that. I left Garrett at the coffee shop and drove home, thinking about Rebecca's threats and what kind of evidence she might think she had. Our marriage hadn't been perfect, but it had been normal. We'd argued about money, about her family's involvement in our lives, about her spending habits and my work schedule. Normal married couple disagreements that she might try to reframe as abuse or control. The problem was that perception often mattered more than reality, especially in the court of public opinion. Rebecca was skilled at presenting herself as a victim when it served her purposes, and she had 8 years of marriage to mine for examples of times I'd been less than saintly. When I got home, I found Rebecca's car in my driveway. She was sitting on the front porch steps, looking small and vulnerable in a way that was probably calculated for maximum impact. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and she was wearing clothes that looked like she'd slept in them. "We need to talk," she said as I approached. "No, we don't." "Yes, we do. Because I know things about you, Jonathan, things that would change how people see this whole situation." I stopped walking and looked at her carefully. "What things?" "The way you controlled our finances, never letting me have access to our real accounts. The way you monitored my spending, questioned every purchase. The way you isolated me from my friends when they tried to point out how unhealthy our relationship was. I never controlled our finances, Rebecca. Your father controlled our finances. I never monitored your spending because it wasn't my money you were spending, and I never isolated you from anyone. That's not how I remember it. Your memory is conveniently selective." She stood up, and I could see the desperation in her eyes. "I can make people believe me, Jonathan. I can make them see you as the controlling husband who drove his wife into another man's arms." "Go ahead." The response clearly wasn't what she'd expected. "What?" "Go ahead. Tell your story. Explain to everyone how I controlled you by letting you spend unlimited amounts of your father's money. Describe how I isolated you by encouraging you to spend time with Maya and your other friends. Detail how I monitored your spending by ignoring the credit card statements that showed hotel charges every Tuesday and Thursday. People will believe me. Some people might. The same people who think affairs are justified by marital problems. But most people will ask the same questions I'm asking. If I was so controlling and abusive, why didn't you divorce me? Why did you stay married while having an affair? Why are you only making these accusations now that your boyfriend has disappeared and your father has cut off your money? Rebecca's face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw past the manipulation to the genuine panic underneath. She was a woman who'd never had to face real consequences for her actions, and she was discovering that the world was less sympathetic than she'd expected. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she whispered. "You have Maya's apartment." Maya's getting tired of the drama. She says, I need to figure out my life and stop expecting other people to fix my problems. Even her best friend was abandoning ship. That told me everything I needed to know about how this story was playing in our social circle. "Rebecca, what did you think was going to happen? You had an affair, got caught, and now you're facing the consequences. Did you really believe everyone would rally around you and blame me for your choices? I thought people would understand that marriages are complicated, that sometimes people make mistakes when they're unhappy. You weren't unhappy enough to ask for a divorce. You were just unhappy enough to cheat while keeping the financial benefits of being married. That's not fair. It's completely fair. You wanted the excitement of an affair and the security of a marriage. When you couldn't have both, you chose the affair and hoped you could manipulate your way back into the marriage when it suited you." I walked past her toward the front door, but her voice stopped me. "Jonathan, please, I'm begging you. Let me come home. Let me try to make this right." How? How do you make 8 years of lies right? How do you make 3 months of hotel receipts right? How do you make the humiliation of discovering your wife's affair through credit card statements right? I don't know, but I'll figure it out. I'll do whatever it takes. What you'll do is find a job, get your own apartment, and build a life that doesn't depend on other people's money or forgiveness. You'll learn to live with the consequences of your choices like an adult. I can't afford an apartment. I can't afford anything without my father's money. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to spend his money on hotel rooms with your boyfriend. I went inside and locked the door behind me, leaving her on the porch. Through the window, I watched her sit back down on the steps, her phone pressed to her ear as she made call after call to people who were apparently no longer taking her calls. After an hour, she finally left. That night, I got a call from Detective Vega. "Mr. Blackwood, we reviewed the security footage from your neighbor's camera. We have clear evidence of your wife vandalizing your vehicle. Do you want to press charges?" I thought about Rebecca sitting on my porch steps, desperate and running out of options. Pressing charges would add a criminal record to her growing list of problems. "Not at this time," I said. "But I'd like the footage preserved in case the situation escalates." "Understood. I'd also recommend documenting any future contact attempts. Text messages, phone calls, emails. If she continues to harass you, we'll need evidence of a pattern." After I hung up, I sat in my quiet house thinking about patterns and consequences and the difference between justice and revenge. Rebecca was destroying herself more effectively than I ever could, and watching it happen was less satisfying than I'd expected. But I wasn't going to save her from herself. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over." I screenshotted the message and added it to the growing file of documentation Detective Vega had recommended. If Rebecca wanted to escalate this situation, I'd be ready. But I hoped, for both our sakes, that she'd find the wisdom to walk away before she made things even worse for herself. 3 days later, Rebecca made her move. I was in a client meeting when my assistant knocked on the conference room door with an expression that meant trouble. "Jonathan, there's a situation at the office. You need to see this." She handed me her phone, which was displaying a Facebook live stream. Rebecca was standing in the lobby of my building, speaking directly into her phone camera with the kind of manic energy that made people stop and stare. "Want people to know the truth about Jonathan Blackwood," she was saying to her growing audience. "Everyone thinks he's this innocent victim, but I lived with him for 8 years. I know what he's really like behind closed doors." I excused myself from the meeting and took the elevator down to the lobby, my assistant following behind with her phone still streaming Rebecca's performance. A crowd had gathered around her, some filming with their own phones, others just watching the spectacle unfold. Security guards were approaching cautiously, clearly unsure how to handle a woman who wasn't technically breaking any laws but was definitely causing a disturbance. "He controlled every aspect of my life," Rebecca continued, her voice getting louder as she noticed the security guards. "He monitored my spending, questioned my friendships, made me feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. When I finally found someone who treated me with respect, he destroyed my life out of spite." I stepped into her line of sight, and her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that was genuinely unsettling. "There he is," she announced to her phone. "The man who's been telling everyone I'm a cheater and a liar. Ask him about the emotional abuse, Jonathan. Ask him about the financial control. Ask him why his wife had to find love somewhere else." The lobby had gone completely quiet except for the sound of phones recording and the soft hum of the air conditioning. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. I walked over to Rebecca slowly, keeping my voice calm and level. "Rebecca, you need to leave. I need to tell the truth. People deserve to know what you're really like." "The truth is documented, Rebecca. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, text messages. The truth is that you had an affair for 3 months and got caught. The truth is that you drove me to it with years of psychological manipulation. The truth is that you're having a public breakdown because your father cut off your money and your boyfriend disappeared when the credit cards stopped working." The crowd was murmuring now, phones capturing every word of our exchange. Rebecca's live stream was probably being shared across social media, but not in the way she'd intended. "You can't dismiss me like this," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "You can't just throw away 8 years of marriage because of one mistake." "One mistake? Rebecca, you had a 3-month affair. You spent thousands of dollars of your father's money on hotel rooms and champagne. You lied to me, to your parents, to everyone who cared about you. That's not one mistake. That's a series of deliberate choices. I was unhappy. Then you should have asked for a divorce, like an adult. Instead, you decided to keep the benefits of being married while enjoying the excitement of being single." Rebecca looked around the lobby, perhaps finally realizing that her audience wasn't responding the way she'd hoped. The faces surrounding us showed curiosity and pity, but not the outrage and support she'd been expecting. "You're making me look like a monster," she whispered. "I'm not making you look like anything. I'm stating facts. You're the one who chose to bring this into my workplace, to make it a public spectacle." Security finally intervened, politely but firmly escorting Rebecca toward the exit. She kept her phone camera rolling, narrating her removal as if it proved her point about my controlling behavior. "See how he has everyone on his side?" she said to her audience. "See how quickly they get rid of me when I try to tell the truth?" After she was gone, I stood in the lobby for a moment, looking at the faces of my colleagues and clients who'd witnessed the entire scene. Some looked sympathetic, others embarrassed. A few seemed entertained by the drama. My phone was already buzzing with notifications. Rebecca's live stream was being shared and commented on across multiple platforms, but the response wasn't what she'd expected. "Girl, you cheated on your husband and you're mad that he's not taking you back? This is what happens when you've never faced consequences for your actions. The audacity of showing up at his workplace to call him abusive after you had an affair. She's having a breakdown because her sugar daddy cut her off and her side piece disappeared." By evening, Rebecca's public meltdown had become a cautionary tale about entitled behavior and public humiliation. The video was being dissected on relationship forums and shared in group chats as an example of how not to handle getting caught in an affair. I got home to find Theodore Harmon's car in my driveway. He was sitting on my front porch, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. Elizabeth was beside him, her face drawn with the kind of exhaustion that came from watching your child self-destruct in public. "Jonathan," Theodore stood up as I approached. "We need to talk." "Of course, come inside." We settled in the living room, and for a moment nobody spoke. Finally, Elizabeth broke the silence. "We saw the video, Rebecca's performance at your office. I'm sorry you had to see that." "We're the ones who should be apologizing," Theodore said heavily. "We failed as parents. We gave her everything she wanted without teaching her that actions have consequences. We created this situation by enabling her behavior for 36 years. "Mr. Harmon, no, let me finish. Rebecca is our daughter, and we love her. But we can't support what she's become. The lying, the manipulation, the public spectacle today. That's not the woman we raised her to be." Elizabeth was crying quietly, the tears of a mother watching her child make choices that couldn't be undone. "We've decided to cut off all contact with Rebecca until she gets professional help," Theodore continued. "We won't enable her behavior anymore, and we won't allow her to use our relationship as leverage in whatever game she's playing." "That's a difficult decision. It's the only decision. We should have made it years ago." They left shortly after, two parents facing the reality that their daughter had become someone they couldn't recognize or support. It was a conversation that probably should have happened when Rebecca was 16 and testing boundaries, not 36, and destroying relationships. That night, I got one final text from Rebecca. "You've turned everyone against me. My parents, my friends, even strangers on the internet. I hope you're happy." I typed back, "I didn't turn anyone against you, Rebecca. Your choices did that. I just refused to pretend they didn't happen. I have nothing left. You have the opportunity to build something real. Get a job, find your own place, learn to live without other people's money. Discover who you are when you can't rely on family wealth or manipulation to get what you want." "I don't know how to do that." "Then learn, the same way everyone else does. One day at a time, one decision at a time, one consequence at a time." The text conversation ended there, and I never heard from Rebecca again directly. But I heard about her through the network of mutual acquaintances who tracked the aftermath of our very public divorce. She moved back to her hometown in East Texas, got a job at a real estate office, and rented a small apartment that she paid for with her own earnings. Maya posted occasional updates on social media, Rebecca looking tired but determined at some local charity event, Rebecca smiling awkwardly at a work party, Rebecca slowly building a life that didn't depend on other people's money. The divorce was finalized 6 months later with minimal drama. Rebecca had finally learned that fighting battles you couldn't win was expensive, and she could no longer afford expensive mistakes. I kept the house, the furniture, and the quiet satisfaction of watching someone finally face the consequences of their choices. It wasn't revenge, exactly. It was just reality, catching up with someone who'd spent their entire life outrunning it. The hotel receipts were still in my desk drawer, faded now but still legible. Evidence of a marriage that had ended not with violence or dramatic confrontation, but with the simple presentation of facts that couldn't be argued away or reframed. Sometimes the most devastating revenge was just refusing to participate in someone else's fantasy about who they were and what they deserved. Rebecca had wanted to be treated like a queen. In the end, she discovered that queens without kingdoms were just women with expensive tastes and limited options. I was content to remain furniture, solid, reliable, and built to last.